welcome to the first, hopefully, of a few of these Chats with Cheryl. And I was telling Marcus the reason why this came about was because during this interesting year, during this interesting time, the world is a little crazy, and at Great Harbor, we've had to pivot a little and figure out how are we going to get the best out of this summer for our members. And the staff and the board of directors and the volunteers on all of the committees have really tried to come together and figure out how to give the members the best that we can during a global pandemic. And so back in April and May, when the social committee got together on the phone, on a Zoom call, and chatted about what can we do over the summer to really kind of connect our members and make sure people are seeing each other, and a reminder of what Great Harbor really is all about. I thought about our membership and what amazing people that we have here. They're smart and they're driven and they're interesting, and so I thought, what better way to really showcase all that we have than to introduce people, our members, to somebody that they may or may not know. So that's how Chats with Cheryl came up. And I am going to talk with Marcus today for about maybe half an hour or so, and then get Q&A at the end, and we encourage questions, absolutely. I want to make sure everybody has a drink, everybody's comfortable. It's probably only an hour or so. Okay, we're gonna get going. All right, thank you first off, Marcus Fuller, for coming to be with us this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think my mic's shut off. Can anybody hear me?
Oh,
Hello?
is it on?
No.
I'm good.
That's never a technical advisor. Wave at Cheryl, the red one.
Oh.
All man.
There we
Doesn't
go.
bother me in the least.
Doesn't bother you at all.
He knows how to project his voice.
Yes.
Are you kidding? I have a daughter. I know how to do nail polish. I can do.
Hello?
Okay, there we go.
Hi, I'm Marcus Dean Fuller, and I want to say thank you for having me. I was really honored when Cheryl reached out. I thought, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. What am I going to say? Why would anyone want to listen? But I'm really honored to be here. I know many of you, most of you, maybe not all of you, but it's interesting. One of the things we started talking about before you guys arrived is the fact that the club is so dynamic and diverse, and it's really amazing. It's really, I think it speaks to the club in great ways. You know, and we were saying, how often over the years do you catch yourself in a small conversation at a fuel bar or in the hall or just casually, and 2 minutes later you're kind of pulled away because of life or kids or schedule or whatever, dinner reservations, and you go, man, that was an amazing conversation. I would love to have chatted with them longer, and then the summer goes by. So I think this is brilliant, a really way to kind of get to know each other. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So some of you may know Marcus from TV or from theater or etc. But he is a writer, director, actor, and producer with over 25 years of experience working in film, television, and stage in LA, New York, and he's currently in Saratoga Springs. In 2008, Marcus and his wife Julie founded Compass Entertainment to develop and produce independent film, theater, and media. He's taught numerous courses on both acting and producing at RPI, Rutgers, Skidmore, and Union College. In 2017, many of you may know, Marcus served as Director of Artistic Development with the White Heron Theater here on Nantucket, where he oversaw development and production of Dark and Stormy, which he wrote and produced. And he continues to sit on the advisory board at the White Heron. More recently, in October of last year, he was named the new Executive and Artistic Director at the Saratoga Shakespeare Company. Marcus, thanks so much for being here. Okay. So I did a lot of research on Marcus, and I'm going to go through some of these questions a little kind of chronologically, but if you want to get out of step, I'm totally happy with getting out of step. But I'm going to start out with Toledo, Ohio, where you grew up. So it's a long way from LA, it's a long way from the theater companies in New York City. How did you go from being a Midwestern boy to acting in commercials and soap operas and in LA?
That's actually a great question. So, you know, growing up, I was an Ohio farm boy, and there's not a lot there. So you tend to build a good imagination when you're running around the fields and the woods and all those things with your friends. And a few high school plays, but I was in love with literature, and I really have to attribute that to my mom, who used to take all the classics in our house and leave them on the lowest shelf of the bookcase. I think knowing that we were going to kind of get at them. I have 5 older sisters, and they're about 20 years older than me, so there was a huge farm spread. And one of my sisters is special needs, and I took care of her a lot growing up. So I didn't. It cuts into your ability to socialize a lot when you're young, and so I spent a lot of time reading, and I spent a lot of time with myself and my imagination. And somewhere in high school, late high school, I had this inkling that I wanted to create. I wanted to write. I wanted to create stories, and I thought the best way to do that might be being an actor. So I on my own, I reached out and I set up. I ended up with an audition at Juilliard and an appointment. And then one day we had a lot of property. It's a farm in Ohio, of course. And one day I was on the tractor, and I was probably 17, 18. And I was on this tractor, and my hands were muddy and greasy, and my boots were all destroyed. And there's tapestry of curse words because the damn thing blew up. And I'm out there in the field working on this thing. I hit it, and I just kind of buckled over, and I looked at my boots, and I remember my hands were filthy, my boots were dirty, and I had sweat coming off me. And I thought, guys like me don't go to Juilliard. And so I didn't. I never showed up for my audition.
You just didn't show up.
I just never showed up. I thought it was that boat had sailed, and I needed to figure out something to do with my life. So I had to pick a college really quickly, like instant. They were like, "Where are you going?" And I had gotten into a bunch of really good schools, and my parents said, "Great, but at this point, you got to pick something in state." So I ended up going to Ohio University, which is the absolute farthest you can get from my hometown within the state. And I studied English literature, and I ended up studying philosophy and psychology as well. And somewhere in my, I became social chairman for my fraternity. And what I found myself doing was setting up these parties on weekends, and then I would kind of sneak away the minute the party was going, and I'd go to the theater. And so I'd go and I'd watch these great plays. I thought they were great. I mean, I was a young kid, and I would sneak back, and I still couldn't quite shake it. And somewhere in there, I had a professor named Dr. Cure, and he used to refer to me as scholar. I'm not sure to this day if that was a compliment or not. But I'd walk in his office, and he'd go, "Hello, scholar," and he would smell tobacco and all those things. And I had to take 2 Shakespeare classes from him. And I didn't want to do it. I hated Shakespeare. I knew nothing about it. I didn't understand it. And so I said, look, I will do anything. I'll do extracurricular, whatever. I'll TA course. I don't want to take this course. He said, no, you're going to take them. But here's what you're going to do. He said, I want you to spend the summer not just reading them, but read them out loud. He said, the work was never meant to be read. It was meant to be heard. It was meant to be spoken. And I said, great, thanks, whatever. Right? So I went home that summer, and I cracked them open eventually, and I started reading them out loud to myself. And this really strange thing happened, which is they opened up for me. And being a young kid who didn't really have any history of classics in that way, like Shakespeare specifically, or any performances, I'd never seen a Shakespeare production. And what happened was I had nowhere to put it within the culture that we're used to seeing it. I'd never seen a production of Hamlet. I didn't know that they cast a young blonde kid as Hamlet or whatever. And nowhere in the text does it say that he is. So for me, suddenly, it all became very personal. And instead of this antiquated language, it blew open for me. And I was reading these stories that were dealing with human beings. And suddenly I saw this roadmap for my life. It taught me about character, about how you do the right thing when nobody's looking, because there it is on the page, but that's what it actually looks like in practice. And sometimes good people do bad things, or bad people do good things. But it's the swing between those two things that is so unforgiving in Shakespeare, and that also lets us recognize that as an actual human, because that's how we all are. We're all flawed, we're all brilliant and wonderful and terrible in turn, right? So I knew at that point I planned on going to law school after graduation, and I had my sights set on a good law school, and somewhere after that summer I knew I wasn't going to law school. But I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I still thought acting was kind of off the table. And I'd begun writing at this point. I wrote my first book as a junior in college, and I never published it. And I had a teacher that wanted to shepherd it through the process. It was called This Side of the River, and it was about a group of friends, and how friendships fall apart and when they're tested. Obviously, it's what young kids write about, right? So I knew I had the muscle and I wanted to do it. But again, I was scared. I was terrified. I was like, I can't make a living as a writer. No, I gotta do something else. So of course I did the most responsible thing after college. I went to Key West. Hold on. So here I am in the Florida Keys, and somewhere in there I became a dive master. I started diving, and I worked on a dive boat, and I was, diving all day long and working the tanks. And the beauty of being a dive master on a boat is, you're in this very public place around tourists and around all these other people, but it's like being at a really crowded party. You don't have to actually talk to anybody. So I would stay on the boat and just be quiet, and I spent a lot of time staring at the ocean and in my own thoughts, trying to figure out my life, what I was going to do next. And I really loved the ocean. And one night, I had finished cleaning up the boat, and I put all the tanks away, and I walked over across the street to this place called Hog's Breath, which is this patio bar out in Key West, very famous. And the bartender knew me because I'm a local. And right, so I sit down next to this guy, and he's got this ponytail, and he's smoking a cigar, and he's drinking something brown, and he kind of looks me up and down, and he goes, "You, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a diver." And he goes, "You dive. In my ocean, you dive." I was like, okay, this could be the conversation, right? Turns out he was fantastic. He was great. He had the money to buy back ex-Navy and ex-show dolphins for release back into the wild. And so I ended up getting hired, I'll keep it short, I was hired as the dive master on the very first team that re-released dolphins into the wild. So I spent time with them working on these dolphins and kind of helping manage them, and mostly I was underwater fixing fences in the lagoon most of the time. And again, you're Ohio farm boys down there blowing bubbles, and there's a dolphin bumping you, and I thought, wow, this is really cool, right? So you don't get this in Toledo. And so I was I started to think maybe that there was a career here, maybe this was what I wanted to do, and maybe this was what I was kind of made for. So there was this dolphin named Sugar, who was a one-eyed ex-show dolphin from SeaWorld. And Sugar and I had a bit of a romance. I would show up at the lagoon. We couldn't release her because she was injured. And I would show up at the lagoon, and she would follow me around, and everyone it became a thing. Everyone's like, "Oh, your girlfriend, yeah, okay, got it." It was great, and Sugar passed away. And somewhere around that time, I left the Keys, and I decided I was going to give it a shot. I knew that whatever happened next, I would be remiss if I didn't at least try it in my life. So with that, I packed up and I moved to LA. I knew one single person who I'd met in the Keys. She was friends with my landlord. That's a weird thing, but she said, "If you're ever in LA, you have a place to crash, let me know." I was like, "Great." So I called her when I got to Vegas, and I said, "Do you remember me? I need a place to crash."
So in the back of your mind, were you thinking to yourself like acting, or were you just thinking, I just need a change of scenery, let's just...
So acting, I said, I'm gonna try it. I'll fail like everyone else that goes out there to do it, and I'll come back and go to grad school. So I show up, and she gives me this place to stay for 1 week. Turns out she lives in Beverly Hills in this really nice condo. There's a guy behind her that was trying to court her at the time, who was a TV producer. And so he had invited her to a party. She dragged me along so I could meet everybody. Everyone's beautiful and glamorous, and I'm there in cut-off khakis, and I'm way too tan at this point, right? So I've been on a boat for over a year, and I just didn't feel comfortable and fit in. So I went outside, and he had this rope swing I started kind of monkeying around on. And somewhere in the party, he came out, and he said, David, this guy, he comes out, and he says, what do you do? And I said, "Oh, I'm an actor. I've been here like 3 days." I go, "Oh, I'm an actor." And he goes, "Oh, okay, that's cool. That's great. It's great. I mean, what are you working on right now?" I was like, "Nothing." Right? And he says, "Well, listen, we're putting together this Miller Beer spot, and we auditioned everybody in LA and New York, and we're looking for this really all-American kind of guy. And I just saw you playing it." He goes, I mean, is that something you'd be interested in?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And he goes, "Okay, who's your agent?" And I said, "I don't have an agent." He said, "Well, okay, I'll take care of that." And he turned around and started walking away. He looks at me and he goes, "Are you in the union?" And I went, "What union?" He goes, "I'll take care of that too." So 3 days in, I got an acting job, I got an agent, and I got in SAG, and I thought, this isn't hard at all. I don't get why people can't figure this out on their own. So 7 years go by, and suddenly I'm a working actor. I've been doing TV and film, and I'm on, been on shows and independent films, and I'm right at that point where I'm about to really explode. I auditioned. This is a dirty little secret, and nobody outside my family knows. I auditioned against Ben Affleck for the role in Pearl Harbor. So this just tells you where I was at the time as an actor. I was flying right there. You know what I mean? I was one of the 9 guys they considered for Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man. So I was in the room, and it was like everyone was kind of looking for what it was, my role, whatever that was going to be next.
And were you enjoying your time in LA? Was there something missing?
I hated LA,
Okay.
and I was not enjoying my time in LA. That's a great question, actually, because I was working, and everybody's dream as a young actor, as 20-some young actor in LA, is to be working. And here I was making great money, and my friends were buying cars and all these things, and they were glamorous, and they were going out partying every night. And I worked. I got fired from the only other job I ever had there, which was I was a bartender at this place called the Whiskey Bar at Sunset Marquis. And I remember my boss came in one day and said, "Marcus, you're fired." I went, "Why? What'd I do?" He said, "I want to show you something." And he literally turned on the TV, and the show I was on at the time was on. And he goes, "You need to be on the other side of the bar. You need to go enjoy this moment. It doesn't last forever. You need to go enjoy yourself."
It was a huge favor he did for you.
It actually really was. And so he got me drunk that night. He put me on the other side of the bar and just made me sit there with all the other stars. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And he said, your job's always here if you want it, but just go have fun. So but I didn't do any of those things. I didn't buy cars. I didn't whatever. I just kept saving money. I was really
A
nervous
good
about
Midwestern boy.
Good Midwestern boy. So it just wasn't my thing, and more I found myself writing again, and not being challenged in the work that I was doing. So I was getting cast in these roles, and the money was in everything, but I just wasn't satisfied. And one day, this opportunity came. I went and saw a play at a place called Noise Within, and it's a classic theater company in Los Angeles, for anybody that knows it. And I said, that was brilliant. And again, I felt that white knuckle feeling I got when I was a kid, or watching plays when I was younger, or reading Shakespeare for the first time. And with The Noise Within, I saw my first Shakespeare play. And it was brilliant, and they were amazing. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. It hit me like a gut punch. And I reached out, and I ended up getting an audition with them. And I came in, and I was nervous. And here I am, I'm doing TV and film, and I'm on a series at the time. And I was just shaking, right? And I do my audition. I'll never forget, the director is now a friend named Art Mankey, and he just sat there the whole time watching me, and I finished, and he just kind of looked at me and shook his head, and he looked at my resume, and he goes, you have no training. And I said, yeah, but I'm on a show, right? I mean, does that count for something? He goes, look, you're really good. And he said, but you need training. And he said, look, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna cast you in a small role, but I want you to sit in with me through all the rehearsals. I want you to see how I direct. I want you to watch the actors work. Okay, and we'll just start this kind of apprenticeship. And so I did. And it became mind-blowing. We ended up doing this play, and there's this moment, it was a Shakespeare play, and it was the first Shakespeare play I was ever in. It's called Cymbeline. And there's a moment in Cymbeline where this actor comes out of a trunk. And it was played by this guy named Rob Dean, who's also still a friend of mine. And he was beautiful at the time. He would just emerge from this trunk. It's all candlelit, and he's got this big cello of a voice, and it's like, no, just the talk. And you'd watch 300 people just slowly lean in to hear him. And backstage, all the actors would gather backstage and watch the performance, whether they knew it or not. They would just kind of find themselves there during the scene watching, and then they kind of drift away. So I stalked him to his car one night, and I said, Rob, how do you do what you do? It's amazing. You just are able to, command all of these. It's really incredible. The language, the audience, the people, everything. And he said, well, I'll tell you a secret. He goes, I'm actually not a very good actor, but I had great training. And I said, oh, where'd you go? And he said, I went to Yale. I went to Yale School of Drama. And I said, I was 27 at the time, and I said, I'm too old. I've got a great agent. I've got auditions. I'm on a show. I can't give up life to go.
You've got the life.
I can't go back. I'm where everyone else wants to be right now. So, I can't do that. And he said, well, think about it. He said, in 3 years, you're going to be 3 years older anyway. And he said, and life is long. You may want to figure out, make some choices, and really just follow your heart. And he said, if that's what you want to do, give it a shot. So I did what I usually do, is I just gave it a shot. I was like, well, let's try it, right? So I suicided. I worked on my audition pieces. I applied to one graduate school, and I got in, and I was one of 16 that they took that year. And I showed up the first day, and they do that thing where they write on the chair of the department came in and said 5,000. And she goes, that's how many people applied for your positions. We took 16.
Wow, that's incredible.
She goes, you are the best of the best. Now it's time to fail. And she just walked out, and everyone kind of burst into tears and ran. Right? So terrified. And here I am.
And so, what was your audition monologue when you went in for the audition? What did you do? You do one or do you do multiple?
I had 8 prepared, and they asked for 2. Okay. So I was like terrified and over prepared and ready.
And did you do Shakespeare?
I did Shakespeare, okay. And it was great. I did a piece from Cymbeline, and it was interesting. I went in and I did the audition. I gave the monologue, and I just started leaving. And the chair, who I didn't know she was the chair at the time, the chair said, "Oh, come back here." So I went back, and she said, and she went through my whole resume again. So it was almost the adverse of my first actor attached, and he backed out shortly before the filming. And so again, my lawyer at the time was like, "Why don't you act in it? Why don't you do it? Right? You're an actor." So I did. And I'm in the middle of all these firsts, and we show up for the first day, and I knocked it out of the ballpark. I will say that. I had a great first day. We got everything done. We got there early. The crew and the cast were like, this guy's good. He's great. It's amazing. Yeah, it's incredible. And then I got a call at 3 in the morning. And nobody wants a call at 3 in the morning, right? My producer calls me. My set producer, Robin Bennett, is wonderful. She calls me and she goes, we have a problem. And I was like, okay, what's the problem? She said, we got hit with a tornado. I was like, it's New York. You don't get tornadoes in New York. And we were shooting in Bronxville at the time. She goes, yeah, a tornado touched down in Bronxville, damaged 3 houses. That was it. Ours was one of them, the house we were shooting.
Oh, that's really bad luck.
And there was a tree laying across the yard in the house, and like everything was blown out, the windows, the electricity was gone, all this, and we are on a very tight deadline, tight margin. And she's like, what do you want to do?
What are my choices?
I don't know. Right? I had a good first day, so I don't know what to do. And I hung up, and I talked to Julie, and we talked about it a little bit. And I said, and Julie, of course, goes, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I think we need to finish the film. And this is day 1. And she was like, okay, finish your film. And I called Robin back, and I said, we're going to keep going. She was like, what? And I said, we're going to keep going. We need to be smarter than our problems. This is what we do. We can create when you can't produce, and especially live theater, right? How do you do that? And I kind of waited on purpose, because I saw this advent of Zoom and all these other things that were exploding, and some of the theater companies were running to do Zoom plays and stage readings and all of this and stuff. And I remember my board kind of said, well, why don't we do Zoom? Let's get on this. Why aren't we doing this? And I said, no, we gotta wait. I don't think this is right. This isn't where I want to see this. And then slowly, you start seeing the shingles getting hung. We'll be back when this is over. We're not going to be able to do this, and things are shutting down. And all this. So I ended up going back to my staff and to the board, and I said, look, what do we have to offer during this time? Maybe we need to start thinking, if the paradigms are going to change, let's change our paradigms. Let's figure out what that looks like now. What is live theater going to look like? What is the performing arts going to look like going forward for the immediate future? And so we started kind of looking at that, and I said, look, we are a nimble company. We don't have a lot of overhead. We don't have a lot of debt. We don't have all these things. Believe it or not, these are great assets right now for everybody. I think it was Warren Buffett that said, when you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. Tide's out, right? So and I'm watching all these theater companies kind of drop. And I said, we don't have those issues, so let's exploit it. Let's take advantage of that now in this moment. What do we have?
And so what we came up with this season, anyways, we had commissioned a new world premiere, a new work by a writer named Damien Lanigan out of London. For those of you that know, it's Beethoven's 250th birthday. And so SPAC, the Saratoga Performing Arts Center, is hosting every year they host the Philadelphia Phil Orchestra, and this year it's going to be all Beethoven, and they're focusing in on the Eroica. Yeah, right. So it's so we commissioned this play about the Eroica from this writer, and we were going to present it as a world premiere, stage premiere. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But we have the commission, we have the play. So what do we do? And so what we came up with is we went into the sound studio and we ended up doing this live recording of it in a sound studio with live music from the Philadelphia Orchestra, which we're bringing into it. I brought in my film crews. I have history there. So I brought in the film crews and we shot intro video of the piece with Elizabeth Sobel, who's the artistic director of the Saratoga Performing Arts